communicate with our children. And I gave a deadline of October, I asked him to provide a new book by Wednesday, October 11th, 2017, otherwise I would provide a new book. It was then on October 11th that Dan had provided our fourth book, which we are currently using. However, I will say that trying to communicate with Dan in the book, there's been numerous requests for things and no responses, no correspondence, no acknowledgements of information regarding our children passed back and forth.
Okay, so in the periods between you described, so it looks like between September 2016 and January, and also between April, like how is communication going back and forth about the kids?
How was it? So it was I found that it was ineffective. There was really pertinent, important information that needed to be given back and forth between the two of us about our children. That just wasn't. Dan had moved to a new address in January, and I had made many requests to ask what that address was. I have made many requests for therapy for the kids.
Okay, I understand. I guess my question was, during the times that people weren't writing in the book, or there was no communication book, how during those times is communication being?
We didn't. There was some attempts of communication through counsel, but Dan and I did not communicate back and forth with each other using the book. There wasn't. I would make entries into the book trying to communicate with Dan, and I would not receive responses back. So there wasn't active communication between the two of us.
Okay. So, in your understanding, why did Dan stop using the communication book?
He had tried to state at one point that he didn't recognize the communication book as the communication book and refused to use it. He had stated that it would be a breach of his current order and conditions in place to use that book, as we were to use a designated book, and he didn't recognize these books as the designated book.
So when you were not using the communication book, or Dan wasn't writing in the communication book, did Dan pass information about the children through Carol?
No. So there was oftentimes the boys would be returned to Carol's day home sick. There was two specific occasions where one, Carter was returned with an ear infection. I had to be called to Carol's day home because he had a fever and was sick, and I had to take him to the doctor, he did have an ear infection. There was another time where Dan had returned the boys to the day home and had just given them off to Carol, and again, Carter was very sick. Carol had to call me. I had to come home and get Carter, and I took him to the doctor. And he had a temperature of, it was just under 104 degrees, and he had a double ear infection. One of his ears was so badly infected that he had bubbles forming in his ears. And he also had strep throat. So nothing was communicated through Dan to Carol. Nothing was passed on to me. I don't know how long he had been fevered for. I couldn't pass any of that information on to the doctor. It was basically, I know he's sick. This is how he was returned to me. There was another incident last fall where the boys were returned to Carol's day home. No advance notice was given to myself, my counsel, or Carol, and both of the boys had hand, foot, and mouth disease. Were covered in blisters on their body, which is an extremely contagious disease or illness. Nothing was planned ahead of time, so the boys had gone to the day home and had effectively contaminated the area until I could get there to pick them up and bring them home.
So, Karen, can I ask you to go to Exhibit 9 in this exhibit book? And can you, corresponding with the information you just gave us, can you describe what these pages are?
Yeah, so these are pages from our communication books. Do you want me to go through some of them, or?
I think I just